savage, Spartan, and very special. The Ferrari F40 was created to be the most unapologetic example of a Ferrari supercar. So is it any surprise that people wanted to race them? And would the car's reputation follow it to the track? This is the story of the Ferrari F40, brought to you by Car Vertical. The F40 represented a departure from normalcy for Ferrari. Since the construction of the first road cars adorned with the famous prancing horse, Ferrari strove to strike a balance between performance and luxury, making strides in both directions, trying hard to sacrifice neither. We can see that ethos is with us today, with the company's lineup consisting primarily of refined, luxury supercars that can walk the walk when you step on the pedals, but can get you home from a racetrack, not that very many visit, listening to the radio and with a cool breeze from the air conditioning. None of Ferrari's current lineup would match the description of a true race car for the road, but I think that's a pretty reasonable reflection of consumer demand. But for a brief window between 1987 and 1992, Ferrari believed there was just enough demand for exactly that. And who better to fill the void than them? The F40 may have been short on creature comforts, but mechanically it was a thing of beauty. The body was made of a combination of Kevlar and carbon fibre reinforced plastic and aluminium. Used in combination, the goal was to create as rigid a car as possible without compromising lightness. Lightness was a theme of the F40, being the reason many nice-to-haves were foregone. Power came from a 2.9-litre twin-turbocharged V8, producing 471 brake horsepower and 577 Nm of torque. These numbers aren't especially impressive by today's standards. We live in a world now where a family hatchback might beat it on some top trump categories, but the Ferrari F40 weighed just 1,300 kilograms. 0 to 62 took 4.5 seconds, and the car would go on to a top speed just shy of 200 miles per hour. In fact, most Ferraris are pretty quick. This one, for example, was clearly exercising some of that Italian power, perhaps a little too hard. Thanks to Car Vertical, you can check to see if your car or one you want to buy has been crashed, stolen, or misrepresented by a seller. This F430, for example, was exported after being written off. Once in another market, it could be hard to know its true history. Car Vertical can show you the hidden history of a car and help you potentially avoid huge bills on a car you don't know the full story of. By going to the link in the description, you can get 10% off a vehicle history check, or you can use the discount code automobilistic. Thanks to Car Vertical for sponsoring this video, and now back to the story of the Ferrari F40. At the time, some critics accused the car of being a cynical ploy, motivated by greed. Others still suggested that the car was Spartan and raw not for the sake of driving purity, but for the sake of getting the car out to customers to compete with the newly released Porsche 959. For the record, this was a pretty weak criticism and can be quite easily dismissed, because the lead time on a flagship sports car is usually longer than 12 months. Given the car's similar on-paper performance, the suggestion was that Ferrari had reacted reflexively and poorly. The price of the car likely didn't sweeten the sour taste either, as the new F40 went on sale at a whopping 5 times more expensive than the outgoing 288 GTO, around $400,000 in 1987, and for a car that had significantly less going on. All of these criticisms were, of course, vehemently denied by Ferrari themselves. Even Gordon Murray lambasted the car at the time, saying that it, quote, wobbles all over the place on the road, and that, quote, the door panels start squeaking and rattling, going on to say that it was, quote, just a big go-kart with a plastic body, and suggesting the technology was from the 1950s. Those are some strong words from a man such as Gordon Murray, who at the time was already a legendary race car designer and would soon go on to design the McLaren F1. But was all this criticism really valid? Well, despite the frosty reception, everybody seemed to warm up pretty quick. with the F40, perhaps partially thanks to the minor controversy, becoming a rare, instant classic. Ferrari had planned to build just 400 F40s, but demand was so high, they ended up building more than 3 times that number, over 1,300. But what good's a race car for the road if no one takes it racing? Ferrari had not originally planned to race the F40, rather make the most capable road car they possibly could. But the demand for a race car was so high that the company caved and started development of the F40 LM with the help of longtime racing partner Michelotto. As the name suggested, the car was going to be up to Le Mans spec, capable of competing in top-flight endurance racing events. But the cars would go on to race in far more besides just European endurance racing. In fact, the car's first racing outing was across the Atlantic in 1989, where it competed in the IMSA GTO class at Laguna Seca. That first race resulted in an impressive third-place finish for the debutante, especially when considering first and second were occupied by the dominant force of the Audi 90 IMSA and their damn four-wheel drive. This was made even more impressive still by the fact the F40 LM was built around the road car's chassis, whereas most of the top-flight GTO cars racing in IMSA were built around purpose-built racing space frames, Audi's included. Unfortunately, the one car being run in IMSA retired from the following race, but it did show that it could make an impact on a good day. They returned to IMSA the following year, and managed to pick up a few podium finishes, but unfortunately they could never make the jump to the top step. Fast forward to 1994, and in Europe the BPR Global GT Series is just getting started. Despite being 7 years old by this point, the Ferrari F40 was still seen as potentially a strong candidate for a GT car. Strandell took the plunge and bought a Ferrari F40 to compete. It actually ended up winning the 4 Hours of Vallelunga. With proven results, 4 F40s would compete the following year, with Strandell now running with the support of Ferrari Club Italia. They once again managed to win a single event, this time at Anderstorp. In 1996, the mighty McLaren F1 GTR stormed the scene, making an immediate impact. Remarkably, the aging F40 managed a win at Anderstorp for the 2nd year running, but by 1997 the writing was on the wall, and F40s disappeared from the FIA GT grid. While all this was happening in Europe, the Ferrari F40 was also being campaigned in the new JGTC. Team Taishan acquired a Ferrari F40 LM, and it actually managed to win the final race of the 1994 season. A single race win might not sound enormously impressive, but the season only had 5 races. A 20% win rate isn't bad at all. Taishan tried their luck again in 1995, this time with less success, as the competition found their footing. From 1996, JGTC moved from the GT1 GT2 rules to a new GT500/GT300 setup, which I explained in more detail in my previous video about the Castrol Toms Supra. Team Taishan continued to campaign the car through the rule change, but it never found great success, as the McLaren F1 GTR won in 1996 just as it did in Europe. After 1996, Team Taishan let go of their Ferrari F40, and the car all but disappeared from top-flight GT class racing. Unsurprisingly, given the fact that nearly 20 of these cars had been built, they did appear in regional GT championships, dominating the Italian GT Championship through most of the 90s, though it must be said that these grids weren't especially diverse. Perhaps the ultimate expression of the F40 though was the F40 Competizione. Now this car was not really separate from the F40 LM. It shared the extensive aerodynamic and chassis dynamic changes made by Michelotto to create the original F40 LM. However, the Competizione was Ferrari's no-holds-barred ultimate version. It made significantly more power than the road version, and quite a lot more power than the normal LM version as well. It had been built at customer request for a Le Mans entry, but others placed orders too, with 10 being built, though the first two were still called LMs. The F40 Competizione boasted 691 brake horsepower, which propelled it up to a top speed apparently around 228 miles per hour, impressive even by today's standards. And for a car that was so focused around downforce, it just goes to show how truly powerful that 2.9 litre twin turbocharged V8 really was. The word icon is thrown around quite a lot in the automotive space, but this car truly is one. You may have never seen one in person, but you know exactly what it looks like. It's beautifully simple, both mechanically and aesthetically, and despite the initial backlash that may have caused, it proved a great recipe for one of the strongest legacies of any car, even in spite of its somewhat middle-of-the-road performance on the racetrack. Few companies have ever created a product as iconic as the Ferrari F40. Thanks for watching.